Welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Football Chaos Show. I am the Sam Adams analyst, your host, Thad Sosa. Today, we got a little bit of a different show here coming down. Before I get into the topic, though, I want to introduce my guest today. I got Jacob from Jake's Fantasy Football blog. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good.
Good.
Nice Thursday night.
Good, yeah, right? I know. I don't know what the weather's like over there, but it's 103 here, so
Oh, not too bad. A little bit
that's
of rain.
oh, that must be nice. All
Yeah.
right, so why don't you tell the people kind of what you bring to the table, what you've been working on, kind of introduce yourself for a second.
Well, this time of year, it's getting into all about the rankings. You got to go over everything and try and get all your lists out before the season starts. And that's what I'm going through right now. The current series I'm going over is I started doing a different way to rank wide receivers than I have in the past. And also, I did that for running backs this year, where instead of, taking some sort of consensus list or taking a bunch of ideas or taking last year's finishes and kind of rearranging it, I just started with nothing and decided to look at all of the finishes from every year and like every number one scorer and what they were like the year before they were the number one scorer, and tried to see if I could find any patterns of what changes between the year that they weren't and the year that they were the top scorer. And I made like a little formula out of that, and it made for an interesting list of running backs, I can tell you that.
Well, good, and that's kind of a little bit what we're going to get into here today. But just to kind of the reason we're here today is, I mean, it's August, Jake. We're in go time here. I mean,
Yeah, I
we have a
kind of.
game.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it started yet, but it's on. Like
Yeah.
we're in it now. Redrafts are starting to come together. People are
Mm,
getting their leagues activated again. And so I think today we're going to be talking about that number one overall pick. And I think me and you went back and forth on Twitter about a week or two ago about this. And I thought it was very interesting how we were debating and the things, your strategy when it comes to figuring out who's going to be number one and why. And so I wanted to bring you on. And I think this is a very important thing because when it comes to
yep.
drafting one overall, 9 times out of the 10, the years when we get to redraft season, 101 is set. Everybody knows who it's going to be. And this year is no different. CMC has been drafted as the number one overall a lot. I think out of every draft I've ever done, including mock drafts, I've seen him go outside the top one once, and he went number three, and it was like a week ago.
Hmm.
And so like I said, we were talking about this back and forth, and so I wanted to bring you on, and I guess I'll just let you start. Why
Sure.
do you think Christian McCaffrey will not be and should not be drafted as the number one overall this year?
Right. So this is a pattern that's been going on for almost 20 seasons. And it's
Oof.
basically a back has a huge year, like Christian McCaffrey's
Mm-hmm.
2019, you know, and that was the second biggest season of all time by a running back. The previous one was LaDainian Tomlinson's in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
His is the best.
Yeah.
But very different style backs, but maybe not as
Yes.
different as you think,
Mm-hmm.
because people like to focus on Christian McCaffrey and say, oh, he's so good. There's no way, his floor is so high. He's just a lock for 100 catches, and and it's like, okay, well, hold up, slow down here. It's like these things already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Big, huge years like that have like a lot of, the whole team, a whole bunch of factors around them sort of make it happen. It's like the stars align for a massively huge season. And I think
Mm-hmm.
some people think that that's still his ceiling as well. And it's like, no, that was his ceiling. He hit it and now it's lower, you know. So that's just a part of it. And it's not to say he's not good or he's going to be awful
Oh, of
or,
course not.
yeah, it's just that he'll still be good,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody else is going to take his spot. And that's the hard question, is like, well, it shouldn't be him because he's already done it. And if we want to just start going back a couple of years, it's like, okay, well, it was Christian McCaffrey. Last year it was Alvin Kamara, and well, people aren't putting him at number one, and they have all kinds of reasons for it.
Yeah.
But then it was Christian McCaffrey. The year
Mhm.
before that, it was Saquon Barkley, and the year before that, it was Todd Gurley. And it's like, okay, Todd Gurley right now,
Oh, he's out. I mean,
right? Nobody even is like
nobody
considering
wants
him, and
him.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay, and that wasn't that long ago when he was the surefire. Everybody had to get him. He was the number one, and the year before that, it was David Johnson, and look at David Johnson now.
It's all fizzled out. I mean,
Right? Yeah,
you're picking some pretty big names that are not being taken very highly anymore. That's
right,
for sure.
but
Saquon
at one
being kind of
point,
the outlier there.
yeah, at one point they were though.
Mhm.
They were the highest scoring back. Then the year after, they were the number one pick, and that's how it went. And well, I mean, if we keep going back, before David Johnson, it was Devonta Freeman, which people kind of
Yeah, that was a rough season for everybody.
Right.
It
Yeah,
seemed like.
exactly. There are a few outlier years
Uh-huh.
like that where it's just like a guy who didn't have a huge year.
You
But
can
the year
trip in
before
the
that,
number
it
one
was
spot that year.
right. The year before Devonta Freeman, it was Le'Veon Bell, and remember how
Mhm.
big people were on Bell and how he was, the first pick, and you had to have him. And I think he kind of threw his own career away, but
Yeah, I agree with that one.
but
He
still,
he got a little big for his
he
britches that
still
year by
was
sitting
the
out.
top back and still went down.
Uh-huh.
Well, and it's not always. It's not always a bad crash like that. But
that's. I mean, you're right. He did that 2019 season. If that wasn't his ceiling, then holy shit.
right,
But
right,
I get a lot of the things that I look at when it comes to like that 2019 season is he was the number one by like almost 80 points.
Yeah.
Like even if he does come down a little bit, there's a lot of wiggle room. And it was almost like I was talking to Lobo a couple weeks ago about Michael Thomas, that even if he comes down a little bit from what he was on that ceiling, there's a lot of room there for him to still land as the number one. I mean, there's not a lot of running backs out there that get 142 pass attempts, and
right.
he caught 116 of them. I mean, he had 15 rushing touchdowns on top of four more,
It was huge.
passing scores. It was, I mean, you're right. It just seemed like the stars aligned for him perfectly.
Right.
But then you look at 2020, and even then, he was on a pretty good pace to. He started off a little slow. I will give you that, but he had 6 touchdowns. He only played 3 games.
Well, and exactly. So if you want to try and use his 2020 stats to project his 2021 stats, that's 6 touchdowns in 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's an extra game in the season, 17 games, but it's like, okay, so you're going to think McCaffrey's going to get 34 touchdowns total. It's like, okay, that's not, you got to tone that down a little bit. That's too much.
33. I mean, no.
Right. But what would be good or could be good, and this is what I did for his projections for this year, is tone the touchdowns down to like a normal level.
Yeah.
Which is about like every 100 rushing yards is a touchdown, and
between 10 and 14 touchdowns. I mean, that's
right. Yeah,
that's a good number for a running back.
Right. Well, and that would be like, you run 1,200 yards, you get 12 touchdowns. And it's not always that way, but it's pretty consistent.
It's a pretty general. I get what you're saying. I got you.
That's generally how it goes. And then receiving, it's different per different guy, and McCaffrey's on the higher end of receiving touchdowns, which is good. But so I projected him with, tone down the touchdowns to still plenty. But there's the biggest thing here is 2019 was different. And 2020, besides the fact that he got hurt, 2019, he had Norv Turner as the offensive coordinator. He had entirely different coaches, different defense, different quarterback, different receivers. So much was different. And then 2020, the Carolina offense was drastically different. And it's, it comes from, the coaches came from the Saints. So they have sort of a Saints-like offense. And if you look at Alvin Kamara is really good.
Hmm.
and he he just doesn't get a ton of opportunities though, and that's kind of where I had
Rushing
Christian
opportunities.
McCaffrey. Right, is Christian McCaffrey now won't have so much, and and that's how I think about it. Is it's a different offense. He's going to have a different usage. So instead of getting like 100 catches, I toned it down to like 85 or something like that, because that's about how many Kamara would get with an extra game,
Hmm.
and which
Which
is
is still
still
a
a
good
lot,
amount of
and still,
catches. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's still probably a top 5 back, but
Hmm.
that leaves more room for somebody else to get ahead of him.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the whole idea is, he'll still be good. You
Uh-huh.
could still take him if you're really sure about it. Uh, there's nothing wrong with
Oh,
it. And really
I
that's
don't
kind
judge
of the
people on their
idea
draft
with the one
position.
pick.
So,
Yeah. Is that I would rather not take a chance on him. I'd rather take a chance on somebody else who I
okay.
think could get ahead of him.
Okay. And we're getting to the point where it seems like if one of the first 5 backs off the board aren't a pass catching back, I mean, forgetting about Derrick Henry having to rush for 2,000 yards and still only finishing as the number 3, I think, in
Yep.
PPR. I mean, if your running back doesn't catch passes, he's not really worthy of that high spot, in my opinion, at least.
No.
And
Yeah.
it seems like CMC, we don't know what Sam Darnold is going to do fully yet. I mean,
Right.
the problem is it's Sam Darnold, so we got to really
Yeah.
kind of
It's
temper
another
what
change.
it's,
Yep.
and that's a big change. I mean, I hear people talking about like, he might break out or kind of come back, have a comeback season, and everybody's thinking like, come back to what?
Right. Come back to
Yeah,
what? Yeah.
to
It's
like
like,
what he was supposed to be. I mean,
right.
and that's
Yeah.
what makes me nervous a lot with CMC is Darnold going to try and go out there and be a hero, or will he use, his biggest weapon in Christian
Right.
McCaffrey? And so I do agree. I can't see him getting 142 pass attempts. That is so many. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of receivers don't ever get that in their lifetime.
No.
And so he will need the pass attempts, I think, to keep him at least in the top 3, if not in that number 1 spot. He needs to have at least 80 catches, if not 100. So I'm with you there. I know that he's got to come down. I mean, that level of production cannot sustain.
Right. Yeah. And that's the hard part is like, well, he's not going to be super duper good, but like he's still going to be good. So
Yeah.
it's, how good,
It just comes down exactly to
Yeah.
how much is that drop off when it comes to him.
Right.
So if not Christian McCaffrey, I know that I kind of brought up a couple players before we came on the show. Who are you taking as the number 1 then?
This was a hard choice for me, and I did, after doing all of my formula and whatnot, there was one player that came out like way higher than everybody else with it, and it was Dalvin Cook.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay,
one thing that I'm iffy about Dalvin Cook is he's never played a full season.
That's the problem.
And the other thing is, if he had played every game last year instead of he missed one for an injury, he missed one for a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So if he had actually played every game, then he would have had more points than Kamara, and he would have been the number 1 back. So part of me was doubting it a little and saying like, well, he wasn't first, but he could have been. And if he was, then he should qualify for this don't repeat thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other things with the Vikings that are going well in his direction. And that's, the Vikings defense should be a lot better this year. They added more good offensive linemen too.
Yep.
Those two things in general are pretty strong factors in making a running back have a good season.
Mm-hmm.
So if your defense, keeps you winning, then that keeps you running the ball to eat the clock. And, if your offensive line is better, then he's got more holes and he can make more room to run. And that's kind of where I have it, is just that he'll do that, and if he'll actually play every game, and then he'll easily be the highest scorer if he does that.
And I'm with you. To me, if it's not Christian McCaffrey, it is Dalvin Cook. I'm right there, same page with you, buddy. It's
Right.
To me, I think when it comes to running back tiers, it's tier 1 is, unfortunately, at least as of right now, until we're proven otherwise, it's Christian McCaffrey. Tier 2 is Dalvin Cook. And then tier 3 is when we start with a bunch of these other guys. I think that they're so close in terms of their skill level and their usage that I think either one, they could, if somebody took Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey, I'd have no problem. I wouldn't even think twice about it. I've debated it myself, especially coming into redraft, we got to start making, unfortunately redraft is win now. So you want to be able to pick players who will help you win now. And Cook, he had 17 touchdowns last year. He had over 300 rushing attempts, like 312, and which is kind of a lot. That's a lot of wear and tear on him. But I think they lean on him more this year, more because, like you were saying, the defense is going to be improved. That offensive line is going to be improved. He is used in the pass game. The thing is he doesn't. If he only scored like 1 receiving touchdown over the last 2 years.
Right.
If you bump that up to, if he scores 4 receiving touchdowns this year, that's just going to skyrocket, And I do agree with you that I think that he has probably, especially because of, Sam Darnold, he just makes me so nervous. He makes me so nervous. And that whole new kind of system that they gone over there makes me so nervous that I don't know what's going to happen. And I do think the safer bet could possibly be Dalvin Cook at number 1.
Right. As long as you're comfortable with, expecting him to play every game or maintain his high,
that's
high
the only
efficiency from last year, and I
try not to do that. I try not to go into a draft expecting somebody to be injured. But at the same time, you still have to, maybe in one of these later rounds, like 10, 11, 12, you pick up Madison just kind of as like a safety blanket in case he does go down. You don't want him either? No?
No, I don't want Madison. I'd rather take a shot on somebody else's backup,
Okay. And that's fair. It's
Madison, when he filled in last year, was not good. Right.
They tried to make him a thing, but it's just almost one of those things where you kind of take his backup just in case. But I also, at the same time, that's hard to do.
I don't
because
like to do that.
If Dalvin Cook plays, 14 games in a row, you just have Madison sitting on your bench doing nothing. And so it becomes kind of iffy when you end up taking, and that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But I do agree. I think Dalvin Cook could, and I've actually been leaning more towards taking him as a number 1 overall, especially since we kind of started talking. I started doing a little bit more research, and I was looking at some things, and I've been kind of switching back over from the dark side here. And
right. That's kind of the goal of these things I find and write about. It's like, I'm not trying to come out and say like everybody's wrong and you're all stupid. Look at this. I'm saying
we leave that for everybody else to say.
Right. I'm like, hey, look, I found something, and we all need to address this.
Yeah.
It's like,
can't go wrong with more research.
Right. It's like, this is pointing us in the direction of don't do that. So, but then what should you do is a hard question and a hard answer.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people just like to take the easy, well, I'm sure about this. And it's like, well, I wasn't sure about it last year. It worked out really well. I wasn't sure about it the year before. It worked out. And I just, repeat, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I kept, even if I picked a different back, even if they didn't finish a lot higher than the other back, it was still like, the difference wasn't bad if I missed either.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's
right,
kind of what's nice about a lot of these backs is if you miss a lot of times, unless there's an injury, it's not by much.
right.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're still getting that high floor. When you were doing your research, and this just kind of popped in my head,
sure.
uh, how many of those number one backs that finished RB1 overall repeated at some other point in their career?
Oh, so that's a good question because never.
Never. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay.
So
That's
if they're that's a good one. That's a good point to bring up because I did write that in there. If they
mhm,
do repeat, it's back to back or back to back to back. It's
not
like, you know,
years
a
down the
stretch
line.
of time.
Mhm.
But right, it's not like was number one, took a couple of years off, came
And then did
back.
it again.
That
Yeah.
running backs, I mean, it could happen. This is just historical pattern,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
I got you.
So it can
We're
be
not predicting the
broken.
future here. We're just doing our
No,
best.
right. It's just something that's happened
Mhm.
for a lot of years. And I want to say that I think it's because of free agency that's really changed it. Because if you go start getting back into like the early 2000s and the 90s, there's a lot of repeats. There's a lot of
Yeah.
backs who, you
The
know,
game's a
scored
lot
the
different
most.
now than it was back
Right.
then, though.
But right. And it's just like, well, there's a lot of backs who scored the most points several
Mhm.
years in a row,
Mhm.
whatever. But then, you know, since like 2003, the last repeat was Priest Holmes in 2002 and
Oh,
3.
geez.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So it's been a while. And a lot of guys have come really close.
Yep.
So that's another example. And another reason why I was extra nope on Christian McCaffrey last year
Mhm.
was he finished second to Saquon by 3 yards.
Ooh.
So he basically finished almost repeated and
Yeah.
basically already finished first.
Mhm.
And, you know, so it's like he almost already repeated 2 years in a row. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I gotta jump ship on
It's
this. I
yeah.
gotta at least put him at 2 for
Yeah, exactly.
2020. You know,
Exactly. Exactly. I got at least
unfortunately, yeah, I
you got
picked
to take him
Zeke
out
to
of
put
that
ahead
top.
of him, but
Yeah, you got to. Well, that's
he
the
still
other
scored
thing
more.
is exactly. I mean,
You know?
that's the thing is when you and it comes down to things like when you take somebody out of that top spot, a lot of the times the answer is, well, then who's going to be there? You know, and
Hmm.
I do think, like we were saying, I think Dalvin Cook is the best answer. I think that he's got the best shot this season to really take off. I mean, he finished number 2 last year, and he only
Yep.
played 14 games,
Yep.
and he was only injured for one of them.
Right.
You know, he
Yeah. The
missed
other
week
one
17
was
because he went to a funeral. He had
yeah.
took some personal time off, which I mean,
And
all for it.
right, it was after the Vikings were eliminated from the playoffs, so it's
Yeah,
like,
so it didn't
okay.
matter. Yeah, I mean, we're
So,
not playing for anything here, so he's allowed to take a day off from work, just like the
mhm.
rest of us.
And some people are, you know, sticklers and they don't like to count the last week of the season because they don't have it in their fantasy games. And it's like, well,
Still matters though.
it still happens.
It still
Yeah.
happened.
Right.
It still adds to his full season total.
Yep.
I mean, and especially if you look at Dalvin Cook, I mean, his lowest yard per average was in 2019. It was at 4.5.
Yeah.
That's if your floor is 4.5 yards per carry,
And right.
that's something
And the
special.
other, and it's been going up
Up.
every year. And
It was
it's
like
like,
5
well,
last year.
5 is good, and 5 isn't unreasonably high either. Like
No,
6 is way high,
six
and
six is
that's
high.
like that's not like that's like a career season, one and done, never repeats that
Yeah.
level of efficiency again, kind of stuff.
And I see
But
6 yards per
yeah,
carry with guys like J.K. Dobbins who didn't have
yeah,
312 carries last season.
right,
You
yeah.
can't do 6
Last
yards a
year,
carry 312 times. It's just
no,
you can't do it. It
right,
just doesn't work that way.
no. And Kamara did that last year too. He had 6 yards per carry,
But he
and
only had
also
100 and I don't
yeah,
know how many carries he had. Not
a little
not
less than 200.
a little less
I
than
don't
200. So I
I don't
mean,
think he's cracked 200 yet, but next year this year he probably will because he's got an extra game.
but yeah, exactly. If that's I
You
mean,
know,
if that's what it takes,
yeah,
especially now that that was a good transition to Kamara because I know he did finish RB1 last season.
yep,
I don't he makes me super nervous this year also. He is
Eh,
being drafted around the top 5.
yep.
My thing for Kamara is he, like all these running backs, to be the RB1, they need the catches. For Kamara to be like elite, he needs catches. He's never had a 1,000-yard season before.
Right. What Kamara needs, actually, and we just saw the evidence of this, is he just needs a ton of touchdowns.
And or he scores
And that's
6
what he
touchdowns,
had.
on Christmas
Yeah.
Day. I guess that
Right.
works also. But if
I thought
I
he was
worry
going to
about
have
it
a
this year.
season like that a couple years back, and he didn't. But
No.
he's been very consistent every year. He has
Mhm.
almost 200 carries. He has less than 1,000 yards, but pretty close. And he has 80 catches and I think around 800 receiving yards. He's
Mhm.
he's very consistent. And then like pretty much the same amount of touchdowns, except for last year he had a huge spike in touchdowns.
Yeah.
And
I worry that
so
we don't
some
have the
people-
check down king this year though.
Yes, because now you don't have Drew Brees,
Mhm.
and some people worry about if Taysom Hill is the quarterback, then he's going to steal some carries away from Kamara, and I kind of get that as well. Like, oh, we're in the red zone. I'm just going to take this myself.
Yeah, and I could see that.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Not good for Kamara's outlook.
No,
But-
and I'm not so much worried about him stealing carries from Kamara because he's Alvin Kamara. They have designed runs for him. I'm worried about
yes.
instead of Drew Brees being there to quickly throw to his outlet and check down on the outside, Taysom Hill is just going to duck and run. So that takes that whole passing point away from him. That's what worries me.
Yeah. I would hope, or I would think that in the offseason here, Sean Payton would coach up whoever's his quarterback.
You're going to throw to him.
Right. It's like, this is the best weapon on our team.
Yeah.
We got to get him the ball as much as we already do. He's got to keep getting those catches. And that's why I'd say, he's still up there. He's still going to be good. He's still going to get a bunch of catches. And, if you start not targeting him and take him out of the game like that, that's just a bad move. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then
Saints are doomed anyway.
Yeah.
The whole team's doomed if they're doing that. And I agree with you. I do think with the offseason, no matter who's the quarterback, they're going to pull whichever one aside and say, you have to pass to him. That's how we win games.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I did get super high on him again after Michael Thomas went down. Because I do think now Alvin Kamara becomes the RB1 and possibly the wide receiver 1 also on that team.
Yep. I do understand that when there's less good options available, that's what happens. And it sort of makes me more interested in who's filling in at receiver and who's the new tight end. And, but what I keep hearing is all the backup receivers are injured now too.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to,
and
Sean Payton's going to have to run
Troutman
out there and try and
but
catch the
it's
ball
like,
soon.
Right. And it's like every, Saints tight end that comes in, people expect him to be prime Jimmy Graham. And it's like, well, that's, that was a super good tight end and that just doesn't happen that way.
No.
Right. It's just, I don't know. The Saints don't look too good to me, especially with they lost a lot of pieces on defense too. Not a positive sign.
That's the problem
But
is we look at the
maybe that's
Saints and
good
a lot of it is, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of teams that we've looked at that like, well, what do you think about them? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
well, they have a good coach and they've won games with with other quarterbacks before, and
absolutely.
But a lot has changed in this offseason for them. A lot more than just Drew Brees.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I think the problem is we look at the Saints are a very good football team. That does not mean that that'll translate to fantasy points. So just because they find ways to win games, it doesn't mean that it's helping out you or I to have any of the Saints players on our team.
No. Yeah, that receiver situation could be really
It's
ugly, and it
and
could be
that's
different guy every week for
exactly.
fantasy.
Well, and that, I
Yeah,
mean, leave it to Sean Payton to troll us every week like he always does anyway. He
yeah,
does not care about your fantasy team. Um,
no,
but that's why I think Kamara, I think they do target now. I think they do target him
right.
more because he
Right,
is
then
such a
that brings
pass
it back
catcher.
again.
Hmm.
Yep,
The receivers
is
go down,
okay.
so now we have this back who is also a receiver.
Right.
You have to use him. You have nobody else.
Yep, yep. So he's hard to move down, that's for sure.
Yeah, I moved him down, but then when Michael Thomas, and when it wasn't a lot, I think I had him as my RB 6 or 7. But then when
Mhm.
Michael Thomas got hurt, I moved him back inside the top 5 because
Yep,
to
sure.
me, all those passes that I thought he wasn't going to get, he's going to get now.
Yep.
I still
Yeah,
don't
I
think he
haven't
finishes
readjusted
RB1,
yet,
but
but yeah, yeah, I don't think he's going to be that good again.
no,
That was probably his best season.
yeah. And it was a good one. I mean, I
Yeah,
think those 6 touchdowns really helped push it over the edge, but yeah. I mean,
yeah,
you can't,
oh
the
yeah,
thing is these guys, you can't deny their talent.
no,
Like it's all there. It's just which one of these guys is going to have just that extra this season.
right. Yep. Which one's going to have that boost? Who's going to
Yep.
just all of a sudden score a bunch of extra
Hmm.
touchdowns? And that's another thing that I found looking back is sometimes that's the difference. It's like, oh, both these guys were really good. Even the guy who was number one last year, but the new guy just scored a ton of touchdowns. So, you know, it's
6
just like,
points. I mean,
right. Yeah.
every
and,
time.
and that's unpredictable. You
Exactly.
can't really guess when a guy's just going to have a big touchdown year. Well,
No.
you can, but
You can come, you can try, you can come
yeah,
close, but it's
yeah,
hard to predict who's going to have the bigger touchdown year, I guess.
yeah.
Especially, I mean, who saw him having that huge game last season? It
Oh,
seemed like every time he touched the ball, it was like, "Hey, you just want to get in the end zone?" Or
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think he was like the each carry he had a touchdown for like
it sure
a
seemed
big
like
chunk
it.
of the game.
My
Yeah,
God, it's like they just gave him the ball, and the other team was like, "Yeah, just go ahead."
yeah.
Yeah, it's Christmas. We just want to get out of here. Go ahead and score. You're welcome.
Hmm.
So, the other one that we talked about um, has never finished as an RB1, which
Yeah,
comes to, as we're learning, kind of come out in his favor. The fact that he's never finished as the RB1.
right.
Ezekiel Elliott.
Mhm.
I am super high on him this year. A lot of
Yep,
people are not. I don't get it.
right.
Um, I think he is a big victim of recency bias. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people are too high on Tony Pollard for whatever reason.
I understand it, but I don't see the opportunity for him. Yeah,
Exactly. I don't. I'm not
yeah,
saying I'm not taking anything away from Tony Pollard. He's a good running back. He's a good backup.
yeah,
He is
right.
not good enough to siphon touches from Ezekiel Elliott.
No,
He'll go
right.
out there to kind of spell him, give him a break, but I can't see getting upset with Tony Pollard being out there like, oh, Zeke
Yeah,
should have had that carry. No, it's just
no,
he's going out because Zeke's going to pass out because he just ran 25 times.
right. So with him, Piard, what I'm thinking is he's going to be he's one of those guys who's just going to be one of the biggest like wasted talents. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just like, well, you're a good back, but you're a backup. So,
Yeah. Sorry, we got
you
a better
know,
one.
right. And I do understand that people thought Zeke was stinking last year and he was messing up, and that's why, Tony got all those extra opportunities, and that's why they think it's like, okay, so maybe what we're
Maybe.
seeing here is that Zeke's production is tied to Dak being healthy and Dak being out there and playing
Seems
because
like the whole
obviously
team's was.
yeah,
I mean, the whole
yeah.
team went down in the first couple weeks. It seemed like they were trying to call up people from, Dallas High School to come play with them.
Yeah, well, I had Amari Cooper in a bunch of leagues, and he just
Yeah,
kept doing the
true.
same thing every
Yep.
week, and I was like,
Amari
"Oh,
Cooper
this
and
isn't
CD
bad."
Lamb, they still performed
Yeah,
pretty well. But even Lamb took a huge, he was on
he didn't
pace.
do as
People
well.
were worried.
No. Yeah,
I guess not worried. I keep hearing a lot of people saying that Lamb could have been what Justin Jefferson was, but possibly a little better.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think,
I'm not one
if
of them, but
right,
I'm
yeah,
just saying.
that's a pretty far stretch. I mean, maybe, it's like, well, Dak started the season really hot, but does that mean he's going to do the whole
Yeah,
season that
exactly.
way?
He can't
It's
sustain
like,
60 passes a
well,
game.
you do realize that, like, after about 4 games in, people start to figure things out. After about
Hmm.
halfway through the season, it feels like a lot of things start to change. And
Hmm.
like teams, it's like the season's long enough where a lot changes as the season goes on. And a lot of people like to point at Russell Wilson and the Seahawks and like how they were so good to start and their passing game was so good. And then they just dropped off.
They started
And,
running way more.
and and everyone blamed it on the players. And it was like, well, no, just
Well, you
that's
just
not what's
can't
happening.
sustain that high
Right.
level of production. I mean, you're gonna
Yeah.
die. Like it's just
Right.
you're just not
There's
built for
that.
that.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's, also just defenses started to figure it out. And, they couldn't,
Yeah,
they kept doing the same things. So
exactly.
then it was like, okay, well, that's not going to work. You have to change it up. And
Hmm.
that's why they fired their offensive coordinator. But,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yep,
that's right. And
yep.
then they say they're going to run the ball more, but it's like, are you? Are you
Yeah,
really?
are you really
I
like
mean, I
when you
know you
have?
want to, but you
I
have to have a
know.
defense for that, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's I think that's a lot of kind of what happened last year was just both these defenses were
Yeah,
such trash. I mean, the Seahawks and
the
the Cowboys
Cowboys.
that
Yep.
I mean it almost didn't give Zeke much of a chance. Like unless he
No.
was going and out there, ripping off 40, 50-yard chunks at a time,
Hmm.
the run game wasn't going to matter.
No.
And so that's when they had to start throwing, which is why I think guys like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb were able still to keep their production high was because they had to throw.
Yep.
But I do think, like you said at the beginning, I think this offense, it needs Dak Prescott in it. It is, I guess, for lack of a better term, it seems a little extreme, but it's kind of at this point, and we found out last season, they're not very good without him. They need him out there either making throws, ripping them off to Zeke. I mean, he has to be out there to make this offense as high powered as it should be.
Mm. Well, so that was another problem last year is in 2020, they had a top 10 defense in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they got rid of Garrett and they got rid of their defensive coordinator and they brought in Mike McCarthy and he brought in a different coordinator. And immediately I was just like, okay, that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Like if you have a top 10, but they kept their offensive coordinator because their
Mm-hmm.
offense was great. So it's
No,
like,
exactly.
why don't you keep them both?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know? So
If it ain't
that
broke,
was
don't fix it.
right. That was the first red flag I saw was like, why would you change your defensive coordinator when you have a top 10 defense? And then on top of that, they switched out like more than half the players that were
Mm-hmm.
starters on defense. So it's like, okay, they were top 10. Now they're going to be like below average. And I'm like, okay, this is not a good sign for Zeke for 2020
Mm-hmm.
or for, but good sign for the Cowboys and their passing attack and whatnot.
Yeah.
And now it's probably the opposite because in 2020 they just started off hot and then Dak went down. But now they got a new defensive coordinator. They, should be improved. I mean, if they're really awful again, that would be a problem. And then
Mm-hmm.
that makes me think that maybe that opens up more opportunities for Zeke to run the ball and
Mm-hmm.
then takes away opportunities from them needing to throw it so
Mm-hmm.
much. But maybe people shouldn't be so high on the receivers anymore
Yeah.
for
I
this
mean,
year, you know?
that's kind of the problem with a team like the Cowboys is they just have so many, I guess, quote unquote, star players on their team that
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to figure out which ones are going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like Zeke he was the RB3 last season before
Yep.
Dak went down, which is
Yep.
normal for him. I mean, he was essentially
Right.
kind of,
He's
he wasn't doing anything that nobody expected him to do.
right.
And so I think that coming back this season with Dak healthy, I think the offense will be improved. I also think Zeke kind of has a lot to prove from
Yeah.
last season. I mean, there's a lot of talk of, I'm sure he's tired of hearing Tony Pollard's name around him.
Right. And another interesting thing about me going back and looking at seasons of, huge running back seasons, a lot of running backs and this was a factor in my score of ranking them a little higher.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of running backs have big seasons in their second season, so their
Mm-hmm.
sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, a lot of those guys are getting a lot of hype right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, another year that a lot of the guys had the biggest, the highest scoring season was their sixth season, which is like, that's a weird number.
That is
Why
a
is
weird
that?
number.
Guess whose sixth season is Zeke's. This is Zeke's sixth
Has he been in
season.
the season
It's
6
like,
years
okay,
already?
that's another little uptick to, like,
Uh-huh.
improved defense, sixth season, proof of past work, basically. Like, he's going to get plenty of opportunities. They
Mm-hmm.
have the same offensive coordinator who likes to use him a lot. Dak will be back. I mean, there's just so many things positive in his direction that should make him have a big year. And he's another one of those guys who could have a shot at taking the one spot. But, it depends on who you like, I guess.
And unfortunately, that's kind of what it comes down to sometimes when you're drafting is who do you like? It's who do you trust the most, Don't I mean, we put all this stuff out there. We try to give everybody the most information that they can to make the best decision that they can. A lot of us kind of contradict each other sometimes. So a lot of times it just comes down to who do you like the most? Who do you trust the most? I go with my gut a lot in fantasy, which might be why only half my leagues pretty much are championship ones and half of them aren't.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's hard because we're trying to predict the future here is really what we're doing.
Yep, it is.
And we try to do it with all
what you
stats
call,
we can,
yeah, and your biggest enemy is any given Sunday, which
exactly.
is, means anything can happen in
Exactly.
a football game. You don't know.
I mean, you don't.
Yeah.
You could have.
Yeah,
I mean, we
I've
could
found
draft CMC 101 overall, and his leg falls off again. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, I heard some reports about that. What he said was he worked out too hard that off season,
and that's kind of what I heard too.
And hurt himself some.
Yeah.
And now apparently they're going to monitor him better, and
babysit
they drafted Chuba Hubbard, and
mm-hmm.
they're gonna give him some, try and give him a little less work. And it's like, well, he kind of already was getting a little less work. And also the other thought in my mind was like, why don't you work out like you did between 2018 and 19?
Yeah, right? Exactly. What are you changing things up for?
From there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You had the system down just fine. Like you nailed it.
Yeah.
Don't change it again. Don't do that. And then, yeah, exactly. And I don't know, man. I thought that I was a lock for the number 1 pick. I talked to you. You got in my head. You got me all screwed up and you got me tilting. I mean, just from the 101 overall. We talked about Dalvin. So do you think Zeke could finish as the number 1?
I think he's got a chance at it. He's, he's another guy who could do it. Just another guy who's a good option, who could score more than McCaffrey, who, could be in the 1 spot.
If it's not Dalvin Cook, do you like somebody better than Zeke? Like who's your number 3, I guess is what I want to know.
So the other guy that I had up pretty high, and I did these ranks, a couple weeks ago in the start of July. So I had Jonathan Taylor. Really
I knew you were gonna say it. I knew you were gonna say it.
Speaking of sophomore backs.
Oh my gosh, I knew it was coming.
And
talk about arguments that I get into on Twitter and everything. Jonathan Taylor's
recent
a big one.
Yeah, the recent news of Carson Wentz is out and Quentin Nelson's out. It's like, okay. Yeah. That's all I'm just like, whoop-de-doo. It's like,
I was worried about Carson Wentz to begin with, bringing him down. So
right.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, he didn't have Carson Wentz last year either.
Yeah, Carson Wentz to me was not going to make or break. I think he could break his season. I didn't think he was going to make it though.
Right. And, maybe he'd probably be an upgrade over, Phillip Rivers, who, wasn't classic Philip Rivers, you could call it. Or what
'Cause
I
he's
said to somebody
90.
the other day, right. What I said to somebody the other day was, "This isn't your dad's Philip Rivers." You know, this
Exactly.
is. There
Yeah,
was a time where he was a really good
he
quarterback. Some people
was.
say he was always bad. It's like, no, he was like a
No.
lock for 4,000
Boo.
yards and 30 touchdowns when that was great scoring, and it's still good now.
It's still, I
But
mean, if
yeah,
you get it, yeah,
yeah,
34,000 yards, 30 touchdowns,
yeah,
that's a good season.
right, yeah.
I mean,
And
there's
then
guys that
people
are
tried to
ranked like
point
that. It's
at,
fine.
yeah, then people tried to point at how, Rivers, yeah, he's had all these good options to throw to, and that's why he's been so good. And it's like, well,
Well, duh.
if he sucked, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah,
He wouldn't
exactly.
have made it.
He
Yeah,
wouldn't have made it. He wouldn't have made it
yeah,
to those, top options.
right. And yeah, so I have Jonathan Taylor up high like that because yes, it's his sophomore season. A lot of people like to point at, oh, he didn't get that much work when he was a rookie, and he got all his work at the end of the year when they played
Hmm.
against bad teams and blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
I don't like that.
Like, and it's like, okay, he was a rookie and he
Yeah.
was learning the pros
Hmm.
and learning new stuff,
Hmm.
and now he has learned all those things. He has grown. He is getting better than finishing sixth with almost 1,200 yards by not
Yeah.
playing every game and being
Yeah.
sat for, letting the vets get chances ahead of him. So, and that's where I was thinking is just like, well, and then, Naheem Hines is there and he's going to take all this work away. And it's like, well, if you look at his stats and
Yeah.
what he did with what he had, and you take Naheem Hines and you leave him alone, but then you say, you know what, maybe Jordan Wilkins doesn't get so much work this year, and a lot of Jordan Wilkins's work goes to Jonathan Taylor instead. And
Hmm.
then it's just like, oh, okay, if you just move it
Just
over.
slide it over there.
Yeah. Or I didn't even do that. I just took half of it and moved it over. And that shot the projections for his stats, way high because he just needs more opportunities and that's it. And this year he's likely to get them. And,
Yep.
yeah. And then people, I think, drastically overreacted to the news of losing these two guys.
Oh,
Yes,
absolutely.
right.
I
Quentin Nelson is good. He's one of the best guards, but it's like,
uh-huh.
that's one player. It's like, okay, so
Yeah.
then they aren't going to run it up the middle and they aren't going to run it to the left very much. They're going to
Yeah.
run it to the right and he's going to get little screens.
Yeah.
And, it's like, he's still going to be good. And we also don't know their timetable for return.
They could both be back by week 1.
Exactly. They could both be back by week 1 and it wouldn't have made any difference. So I had Jonathan Taylor at 2 behind Cook.
Oh, boy.
And I had Zeke at 3 and Christian McCaffrey at 4. But the thing here is I had Cook projected stupid high for no real good reason besides, I don't know, just he had so many positive signs for him.
He really did.
And Zeke and Taylor are really close in what I projected them for points, like 2 points away from each other. So
Okay.
you can flip-flop them if you want, but I'd prefer the younger guy,
Yeah, and that's fair, especially because, like you said, it's the sophomore season. Taylor makes me nervous. I can't fully explain why. I don't like looking into the narrative of, he played against really bad defenses, and I don't look at that kind of stuff. I throw a lot of that garbage out the window.
Right.
I don't like looking at strength of schedule when I draft. I don't care. I don't think it matters. I think a lot of times we overanalyze things too much, and it makes us afraid of good players.
Yeah.
And for me, Jonathan Taylor, I think he's a great talent. I think he will be fantastic in this league. This season, I'm not ready to commit to him in the first round.
Yeah.
I wish I had like a really good, solid reason as to why.
Yeah.
Where I could just look at you and go, well, that's why, right there.
Yeah.
But I'm not there yet on him.
Right.
That's my problem. I can't get myself to pull the trigger. And
right.
I'd take him in the second round, no problem. But he's always fun.
Sure. But I would, and he keeps slipping because of this bad news. And I'm like,
I mean, maybe
I
can look out.
I'm like, right. And I'm just like, well, if I can get one of my high backs that are ranked really high, that and draft them nicely and get Taylor in the second, done.
Yeah, you can get him on that 1-2 turn.
Yeah,
If I walk out of there
ridiculous.
with like an Eckler and a Jonathan Taylor,
Yeah.
I would not be upset at all.
Nope.
Not one bit.
That's great. I'd take it.
Man, this 101 I think is probably the most stressful.
Yeah.
I should say it should be a lot more of a decision than people make it out to be. I think we draft these guys number 1 overall, expecting them to finish number 1 overall, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is.
It's that upside we need, not the plateau.
Yeah, it's like I want to win the league, and I want to pick the guy who's going to score the most. That's what I'm trying. It's like these rankings, these things. It's like I'm trying to predict the season total finishes. I want to pick them in the right order. Yeah. You don't have to draft them that way, but at the 1 you kind of do, because
you kind of do.
Usually one of those guys, it's like, yeah, if you have the 1, you have to pick your 1. If you don't, you aren't getting him.
Well, the 101 is essentially the best player, right?
Yeah.
So if you pick Christian McCaffrey number 1 overall, but the guy that picked in the 5th spot takes Zeke, and Zeke ends up number 1 overall, it's not a wasted pick, but you picked wrong.
Right. Exactly. You picked wrong. But sometimes that difference can be big. And sometimes it might not. It's like, oh, well, all of a sudden Christian McCaffrey has just a funky year where all the defenses focus on him, and he finishes as like a low end RB1 and only scores 250 points. And, then, all these guys finish ahead of him, and somebody who picked some other back in the second round beats you.
Yeah.
Because they took Zeke in the first round and, Antonio Gibson in the second round or something.
Yeah, and they just ran away with it.
Right. And it's like, okay, well.
And that's the thing is that oops. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's all you can say. Oops, here's my money, I guess. But if you draft him number 1 overall and he finishes number 9, is that a bad season? No. It's still, I mean, he's still top 10. He's still an RB1.
It wasn't a terrible pick. No,
it wasn't a terrible pick, but you draft him as that number 1 to essentially finish, if not number 1, number 2.
Right.
I mean, you draft these guys for their upside. You draft them, where we think that they'll finish, essentially. And so, like I said, it doesn't become a wasted pick, but yeah, you missed.
Right.
And you not only picking number 1, now you're not picking into the back half of the second round anyway. So that number 1 pick has to make up for all those players being taken.
Yep.
That's the other problem. So if you have a player that finishes, if both your running backs finish, number 10 and number 15, that's not going to help you a whole lot.
No, that's generally not good. Some other guy with the best backfield is going to win your league. Exactly. Somebody who, guessed better, whatever, didn't just listen to everybody saying pick Christian McCaffrey number 1 overall. Don't even think about it. Right.
I think you need to think about it.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Like, and that it's like, whenever I ask people about it, they're always like, oh, he's unquestionably. It's like, no, question it.
Question it. Just a little bit, at least a little bit.
Like come up with an argument against him.
Yeah.
Don't just keep blasting. Oh, he was so great. He's going to get 100 catches. He's going to be so good. He's going to have a ton of touchdowns. It's like, well, maybe he won't.
Yeah. What if he doesn't? That's the thing.
What's different, And
everything.
Then, yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's just, you need to at least question it a little bit. At least don't just do it because you're told to do it. If you truly believe that Christian McCaffrey will finish number 1 overall, fine.
You can,
it's possible. I'm not gonna, I'm not saying it won't happen, but you have to be sure. And if you're not as high on Christian McCaffrey as you are on somebody else, take somebody else.
Yep.
I mean, don't draft DeAndre Swift number 1 overall. As high as I am on DeAndre Swift, don't do it, please.
Yeah. Right. But you can get him later. So
yeah, exactly.
You don't have to get him
at that point. Don't do that.
Exactly.
But if you like Dalvin Cook, if you like Zeke, I mean, I heard if you do your homework, trust your homework is really kind of what it comes down to. If you think somebody is going to finish because of all these reasons that you came up to justify it for yourself, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just take him overall because you're told to and because everybody else is.
Yep.
Because for one, that's not how you don't win by doing what everybody else is doing.
No, you win by doing, whatever the 8% is doing.
Exactly. You don't get league winners in the first round anyway.
No,
you can lose a league in the first round. You can't win it,
Yes,
though.
you can. Right. And that's another big thing is you got to take a lot of late shots. These early picks, you're trying to get guys that you're very sure are going to be good. And I think that's part of it is people are, oh yeah, I'm so sure about McCaffrey. And it's like, well, I'm
but
more
are you
sure
number
about
one
some other guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, the biggest thing is probably the offense change, the, total different offensive system. It's not Kyle Allen throwing the ball anymore.
No. Yeah.
It's not Ron Rivera and Norv Turner. Okay.
I know. It's completely different. I mean, like I said, I just, God, if Carson Wentz didn't make me, Sam Darnold makes me nervous. Like, it's,
which would you rather have?
Exactly. Like, to be honest, I'd rather eat glass. I don't want either of them. I can't get on board with either of them. I'm worried for both skill positions on both teams because of them. I trust Carson Wentz a little bit more only because he's done it. But
the thing that I'm wondering is, I haven't watched Sam Darnold play all that much. I think most of what I saw of him was his rookie year, and he's just been injured so much.
There's nothing special enough, I guess I should say.
Right.
I mean, he's in the NFL. He's obviously better at this than I am. But
that looked pretty good and was like, okay, well, he was a rookie, so it's like, okay, but has he really gotten any better since then?
Yeah, exactly.
And the question I have now is he really better than Teddy Bridgewater? I mean, people say Teddy was really bad, but to me, it's like, well, Teddy was really average. He was pretty, like, he wasn't super good, but he wasn't really bad either.
Terrible either. He did. I think he did fine.
He finished around the middle of the league, and that's where what I think
he was.
Like, he's an average guy. He can win. He could win you a Super Bowl, sure. But
absolutely.
You need a great defense and the team around him to be great.
Yeah.
But
he can't do it on his own like a lot of these big time guys can. You would need the help, but I think he would be perfectly fine as some kind of game manager.
But then that and I think that's the comparison that I'd want to try and make now is how good is Teddy and how good is Darnold and which one's better, or are they about the same, or and because that the Panthers receiving group is they were all low end wide receiver twos last year because the offense was different, but people are still taking DJ Moore and hyping him up like it's Cam Newton feeding him the ball.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that was a different offense. Things have changed. Now they spread it evenly between three guys last year. It was, it was Moore and Anderson and Curtis Samuel. And Curtis Samuel's gone. So now I'm interested. It's like, okay, so does that mean the other two guys are going to get more work, or a number three guy is going to be really good?
Yeah, it just depends on how much can Darnold get them all the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, even Christian McCaffrey, how much can Sam Darnold pass him the ball?
Yeah.
Can he do it enough and do it efficiently enough to keep McCaffrey in that number one spot? Or does he take kind of a tumble because not only is it, does he have history working against him of not finishing as a number one and somebody else having it, but does he take a tumble just because Darnold just isn't the guy good enough to keep him up there?
Right. Or does he get out of games just enough, get just a little bit less carries, another back when he's getting breaks during games to have him just score a little bit less, enough for somebody else to leap ahead of him. And
just those few carries. That's kind of all it takes. A couple carries, a couple passes here and there. I mean, it all adds up.
It adds up, and that's it. It's just like you have to question it.
yeah. And that's kind of the thing is you just ask the question: should he be the number one overall? Maybe. he's
Yeah.
got a pretty good shot at it. I think him and Dalvin Cook, I think, have equal amount chances of finishing as a number one overall. I'm leaning more towards Dalvin Cook lately, but if you're blind to, Dalvin Cook will never do it. It's got to be CMC. I can't
Yeah.
trust you.
No. Yeah. To me, that's flying blind or
Yeah.
looking too much at the past.
Exactly.
It's like, no, you don't want to draft and you don't want to pick guys based on this year's consensus ranks. You want to pick guys based on next year's consensus ranks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You
it's like,
want them to
well,
be better
what
this
are
year.
those going to be?
Exactly.
But
we,
you have to guess.
Yeah. And
You have to try.
We're all guessing. And that's why, that's why people get so upset about fantasy football. And with, when guys like you or me make some kind of prediction or some kind of take, and then people get all pissed off because we missed, like, oh, I get it wrong sometimes, we're all guessing. Like I give you the best information I can, but
I haven't had that.
Well, that's
most
good.
of the time I get that from people who don't listen to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, start this guy, start
Look at
that
this
guy.
dummy.
It's like, oh, well, oh no, that guy sucks. I can't start him. It's like, well, I'm telling you to start him because he's going to have a good week.
Yeah.
He's going to score big this game.
Yeah,
the opportunities are going to be there. Oh, I lost this week. It's like, okay, well, what'd you do? Well, I didn't do what you said. And it's like, okay, well,
sorry.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
That's I don't know if what I would have done would have helped you win still, but you would have at least scored more points.
I'll say it might have helped, you never know. And I'm big enough to admit my misses, like if we have this conversation about CMC and he scores 150 more fantasy points than every other person out there on the field,
history
I'll admit
is broken.
Exactly.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he had a great season. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna try and defend the take. It's look then at this time.
Right. Then this pattern of nobody repeats.
Yeah. Now
is
you got to blow your shit all the way up and start all the way over, all over again.
Exactly.
So
and that's what I did this year with all these ranks, and I came out with this formula, and it's wild. And the other weird thing is, guess who I have just behind Christian McCaffrey in these ranks? Who's 5?
Oh gosh, is it somebody crazy? Like
it is. It's kind of wild.
Let's see, who's somebody kind of wild? Is it Gibson?
No.
Is it Najee?
No.
Am I close?
All right. David Montgomery came out.
Montgomery.
Yeah. Which I was like, right, sure. And and it was like, people are like, oh, well, he did so much because Tariq Cohen was out. Oh, he did so much because they had Bill Lazor calling the plays instead of, Matt Nagy. Oh, he did so much because he had just good matchups at the end of the year.
I hate that argument.
God. Yeah, right. And it's like, okay, so he's going to have no good matchups next year then, huh? Like,
none.
I would think he'll have at least 4 probably.
Yeah. I know he'll have at least 2 when he plays my Lions. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is with Montgomery, what I saw was he had almost 250 carries his rookie year, but he didn't get to start every game. Last
year,
a
lot to not start.
Exactly. Last year, did he have COVID? He missed a couple of games.
I know he had a real slow start to the season.
Yeah. And people thought that was because Tariq Cohen was taking his work or something like that. But he had almost 250 carries again last year. And he had almost basically what I found was it didn't matter whether Cohen was there or not. His role stayed the same. He really didn't get more carries or more targets per game. It was pretty much the same whether Cohen was there or not.
That blows my mind.
And I was like, whoa, that's a good discovery. That's different. Because I was following in with that narrative of it's all Cohen. And, since he's out, he's getting all this passing work. And I was like, well, if I go per game this year and per game his rookie year, it's the same amount of passing work. And so I was like, okay, that's different. And that's interesting. So now what if I take this and project it out for a full set of games? And it's like, oh, okay, then he is really good.
And he is good. I've gotten higher on him over the last month or so. I was worried about Tariq Cohen. I know that he took a lot of the passing work, not so much away from him, but just
in
he
general.
in
Yeah.
general. I mean, 2019 he had over 100 targets, I think. And
Yeah.
so, and that's a lot. And that doesn't leave a lot for
So
David Montgomery.
right, but here's some other interesting positive signs for that, or negative, you could call it. I heard Cohen isn't looking so good, and he might not
No,
actually be
he's
ready to play this year.
he's looking a little
So,
stiff right now.
yeah, that's one thing. And then the other thing is, maybe Matt Nagy picked up on what Bill Lazor was doing the last chunk of games of the year and is going to actually change his offense a little bit and run the ball some more. And that's another little thing that I was like, well, if that happens, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And, and if Montgomery actually gets to play every game, that's another, that's at least like 30 extra points compared to what he had last year. And he was fourth last year.
Yeah.
Fourth was a big drop from third, but still.
Still, I mean, it's still 4.
And right. So when you cut that gap, and obviously I wouldn't draft him in the middle of the first round.
No.
But
not yet, at least.
When I first wrote that, he was going at the start of the third round, and I was like, wow, that's a good, start of the third round.
I've taken him in the third round, and I didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah, it's like, well,
I have him
this
as
guy,
one of my flex running backs in one of my leagues.
Exactly. And he just finished fourth, and he's being drafted as the 20th back. It's like, okay, if he does bad and he's the 20th back, it's not a bad pick.
No, that's pretty much where I picked him for.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. And it's like, I think he can at least be top 10. I mean, in my crazy ranks, he came out 5th. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick with this. I don't care.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, hey.
And that's the thing is, in the top 12, about half of those guys disappear and about half of them are new guys. So, and that's kind of what you also have to think about. It's like, well, you could just go through every guy, coin flip whether he stays or goes.
Exactly.
And that's kind of
once you get outside the top 5 or 6, I mean, there's all of those guys are up in the air to finish as RB2s.
Yeah. Right. And that was another interesting part of it, is I was surprised how high he came out in those ranks.
Good grief. All right. Well, you have definitely given, I think, all of us something to kind of think about, and just some kind of counterpoints to maybe these safe picks that we claim aren't always as safe as they seem, I guess is really what it is.
Right.
I did kind of want to touch on a couple things here before we wrap up.
Sure.
Just kind of get your opinion. Aaron Rodgers came back.
Yeah.
Do we think he is bound to go to another Super Bowl? And why do we think the answer is no?
So I'm here in Wisconsin. I'm a Packers fan. So, first off, him being out and whatever, and not wanting to come back to the team. This is a yearly occurrence. This happens every year. I was just like, okay, but this time he dragged it out longer.
Oh man, did he?
But he still came back to the team. I never doubted it. I would have started getting worried, like if it was a week before the season and he wasn't back, I'd be like, oh no. But I'm like, you know what? I bet you he'll jump in right in time for training
right in the nick of time. Yeah.
Because otherwise, right now he's just on vacation and he just doesn't
fold up
care.
his beach tent and come back to Green Bay.
He's the MVP. He can kind of do whatever he wants. And so, being a Packers fan and seeing all these things over the past years, lots of championship losses. A lot of people like to pin it on Rodgers, and it's like, well, the offense usually isn't the problem, you know. And last
he scored 35 points, but the other team scores 40. I mean,
yeah. So for a lot of those years, it was the defense being awful, and sometimes other defenses just beat him, and that happens. But there's a lot of those games. It was Packers get a good lead, score a bunch of points, and slowly just salt away the loss because the other team just scores it up and passes them, and the defense can't keep up. So last year against the Bucs in the championship, if that pass to Scotty Miller right before the half didn't happen, that last second touchdown, that's difference in the game right there.
Could have been.
And if we want to, get technical or something, the Packers scored more points against the Bucs defense than any other team did in the playoffs.
That's
So
that any given Sunday thing, though, right there.
sure, but since they scored more points than anybody else did against that defense, it's like, well, that's Aaron Rodgers. That's the offense. But when you let them score 40 on you, it doesn't matter.
Exactly, it doesn't matter because
it's like,
scored.
All right, you're not paying attention to the other half here.
Exactly.
Tom Brady, he really beat up Aaron Rodgers there. He just went punched him in the face, knocked him out first round. It's like, no.
Not Aaron Rodgers, though.
He threw it all over the defense.
Yeah, they couldn't stop him.
Beat him.
Yeah. They just could not stop.
And so
I don't think they can repeat a whole lot either because all they did, they drafted a cornerback in the first round.
Yeah.
They didn't do a whole lot this offseason. I think they were focusing all their energy on, please, Aaron, come back.
Right. So the defense kind of let them down in the championship game, but outside of that, they were really good most of the season. They
weren't too bad, actually. They held their own with a lot. So they're good enough.
Right. A championship worthy defense. Yeah, they were good. But, slipped up at the end. So Packers fired their defensive coordinator anyway. And they got a new guy who I don't think is as good, who's never had a top half defense.
Great.
And I'm just like, he does have some good talent to work with, but I can see the Packers being a great scoring team, win a lot of games, maybe maybe they get the first round bye again, but you can't win without that defense.
And especially not when you get to the playoffs. You're not just playing against, the NFC North anymore.
Right. They aren't playing against garbage teams, random teams. They aren't. Yeah. And that's what I see with it is they'll probably be good and they'll probably go deep, but unless they get some magic to happen, they're going to fall short again and it's going to be disappointment.
Disappointment all over again.
Yeah.
The other one is Henderson. Darrell Henderson. Okay. Obviously, his ADP just, talk about to the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Once Akers went down, and rightfully so. He goes from being the RB2 to now being the, automatic RB1 for the team. My thing for him is I'm worried that he can't sustain an entire season.
Right. So what we saw out of Henderson last year is kind of what I'm expecting out of Henderson this year. It's like he wasn't really he was named the starter. He was kind of the starter. He didn't always get the most carries. He didn't always get the touchdowns. He wasn't always the most involved running back. And I haven't readjusted my ranks since Cam Akers went out. I had him as low end RB1 in whatever. But now with him out, I haven't readjusted and done this sort of scoring thing and checked this formula against Henderson and him, but I feel like it's going to be about the same and he's going to have about the same kind of year, which means those other backs on the roster are good things to look at. Xavier Jones or Jake Funk. Or, and those are the guys I'm keeping a close eye on. It's like, okay, whoever gets a winning or starting role there is who I want.
Exactly.
Not because they're going to be better than Henderson or something, but because you're going to be able to get them so late, so cheap in your draft that, and they'll put up pretty good points. They'll be a good flex play. They'll probably have some good RB2 weeks or something. And that's the kind of stuff that helps you win your league.
Exactly.
Those late picks that people just throw away on backups and depth and old veterans. I'm always like, no, take a shot. Like once you have your starting lineup, just start taking shots on who you think is going to be good. If they're not good, throw them away for waivers, pick up somebody else, and it's kind of like I'm trying to think a week or two ahead. And it sounds kind of odd to be like, oh, I'm drafting the guys that I want would be picking up on waivers in week 1 or 2.
And
it's like, I don't really know what that is.
Exactly.
But it doesn't matter because I'm going to do it anyway, So if I can take shots on that earlier, that's how I usually do it. And, it's a successful strategy, let me tell you.
I mean, it works. I
I
mean,
picked a
that's
lot of good ones last year.
yeah. It's I mean, you sometimes just do what you got to do, and you take flyers on some of these guys, and
Yeah,
they work or they work. If they don't, and then you dump them.
right.
I'm kind of in the camp where once you get past like the 7th round,
Yep.
I
Which is,
throw
yeah,
ADP out the window. I
yep.
mean, it's go
It's
for the guys
just,
that you want. Go for your guys. If they
yep,
hit, they hit. If they don't, then you drop them for somebody else.
right.
It happens all the time.
Right. Go for good looking rookies. Go for
Hmm.
guys who landed in a new spot who look like they could have good opportunity. So like last year, and I'd say the ADP starts around in the 90s somewhere. That's around,
Hmm.
after you've filled out your starting lineup besides kicker and defense, then
Hmm.
it's like if there's still a good, like solid piece guy there, there usually isn't. But if there is, I'll take that. But last year it was like, okay, well, I'll take Deontay Johnson. He looks good. That
Oh
was a
man,
good
was he?
pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take Antonio Gibson. I think he's going to be the starting back for the Redskins. It's
Oh
like,
boy,
oh,
was
that
he?
was right. Like, you know what? I think that Jerick McKinnon's actually going to stay healthy and not tear his ACL again this year. Oh, well, look
Oh
at he didn't. What do you
yeah.
know? He
How
was an
about that?
RB2 for like half the season.
Yeah,
That was nice.
you
And
can
yeah,
find those gems.
yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that's like, hey, I found starters way
Hmm.
late in the draft, and now I went from having a team that looked good to a team that's stacked,
Yep.
and to people who don't really think about it or don't really like go with the flow of the season of, hey, things are changing, things are new, this guy's good this year, roll with them,
Hmm.
you know, try to expect him to continue to be good. Try to change your mindset as the season changes and not be like, oh, well, he was such a late pick, so he's bad. It's like, well, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. Just because he's a late pick. I mean,
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs went
Oh,
in what, the 6th round last year?
yeah.
And look
Oh,
at we're
that was
drafting
another
him.
one.
Some people are,
Yeah.
number 1, number
I
2
was
wide
like,
receiver right now.
right. And last year I had a lot of them. Keenan Allen was getting picked in like the 4th or 5th round. I'm
Hmm.
like, he's a top 10 guy. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Lockett was same sort of range, but I'm like, this guy is a lock for like a low end receiver 1 or like mid receiver 2, and he's getting
Hmm.
drafted like a 3.
Hmm.
Like, okay, that was another one that I nailed in a lot of them, and just it's picks like that, and man, I had a few other ones just uh those are the articles I need to rewrite. I already wrote some of
Yeah.
those about guys that are like, hey, this guy is better than where he's being picked at. He's finished this well, like 3 positions higher than this. It's like, hey, this guy's being drafted like a wide receiver 5, like a bench guy, but he's been a 2 the last 4 years. So there's some upside there. It's
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
that's sort of the opposite of what we were talking about with McCaffrey. It's like, oh yeah, he's had his peak and he's on the way down, sort of. It's like, well,
You
these
want
guys,
upside guys.
even if they already peaked, you know, people are doubting them too hard.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, oh, Stephon Diggs, yeah, that was another one.
Hmm.
It was just when I went over the Bills and looked over all their changes and what the team looked like, and their defense didn't look good to me, so I thought they'd be throwing a lot. And then I thought Josh Allen made a strong leap from year 1 to year 2. I think he's going to make another good leap from year 2 to year 3. And oh man, like I thought they would be good and like outperform their ADP, but they smashed it way higher than
Yeah,
I thought.
exactly.
That was like,
Exactly.
hey, now Josh Allen was the highest scoring fantasy quarterback last year.
Hmm.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, Diggs was great.
Hmm.
I just dumped him in my lineup and never moved him because he just had so many catches and so many yards every week and had like a touchdown every week. It was nuts.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then okay, here's the other one that I nailed last year, but didn't adjust all my articles. So last year I had Leonard Fournette ranked really high
Oh.
because he was still on the Jags.
Right. Okay.
Then after he got thrown out from the Jags, I didn't readjust my ranks and
Hmm.
release him. But it was like, well, the reason why I had him high is because of Jay Gruden being the
Hmm.
offensive coordinator and how much, if you look at his running backs and the guys that he's had, it's just like, it doesn't matter. Whoever's going to be there is going to get at least like 800 rush yards and probably have 6 touchdowns and a nice handful of catches and be a pretty good back. And
Mhm.
then it's like, oh, James Robinson's the starter. It's like, okay, that's my last round pick every draft now. People are like, who's that? I'm like, oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, nobody. Don't worry about
Yeah. It's like, he's the starter for the Jags. Oh, the Jags suck. It's like, okay,
No, almost.
sure
Well,
they do.
good. That was super good stuff. We went a little long today, but I think that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine because
Right.
we had a lot of information to get through. We had like I was saying at the beginning, this is kind of an important question to ask: is that number one spot really as locked in as we think it is? And I think that we kind of came to the conclusion that no, it's not. Anybody has a chance of finishing number one overall. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on today and discussing this with everybody. Why don't you let everybody out there know kind of what you're working on? Do you have anything coming up? What's going on?
Right. The current thing that I'm working on is I am still working on doing receiver ranks, because a lot of people think that receivers are very consistent year to year. They always score high and like the same guys are always at the top. And that's sort of true, but that's not really true. What I found was that they're about as volatile as running backs are as to who's at the top and who isn't and how it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, since I found that, and I came up with my crazy running back formula by looking at how good were the guys that were really good and what were they like the year before that. I'm going through that again now, but with receivers. And I'm finding some interesting stuff about, what makes a receiver have a huge season. And while the direction it's pointing me, I don't really like that much, but it's something. And obviously you have to stay tuned and, read my articles to find out.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
We will make sure that we get those out there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. That has been the Fantasy Football Chaos Show. Please like, review, share everything you need. Tell somebody to watch this show. We're out there trying to get everybody's rosters all set up. We're getting into redraft season. So please, good luck out there. Thanks again, Jake, for joining. I am the Sam Adams analyst, your host, Thad Sosa, and this is the Fantasy Football Chaos Show, and we're out.